Dapper Dave, who's next?
If you have no time and are stressed up to your eyeballs, you need to listen to our next guest. His latest bestseller, Effortless, Make It Easier to Do What Matters Most, is out now. And here to explain how to be clever when it comes to endeavor, it's the very essential Greg McKeown.
Good morning, Greg.
How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Good. Thank you for taking this so early.
Well, thank you for staying up so late, Greg. Where are you? What time is it?
It's just past 10 o'clock. I'm just north of Malibu, so sort of on the outskirts of LA. And you could be in worse places right now.
Oh, my goodness me. Now, first of all, thank you for Essentialism. You know I love that book. Thank you for this new book, Effortless, in particular because it drove me to your podcast in research for it. And I love the podcast, the Essentialism podcast. I love the fact you took the master of Tiny Habits, BJ Fogg, almost to task and schooled him in priorities. How dare you?
It was such a pleasure to have BJ on there. I mean, that was such a delightful episode because we really got to what he wanted, which is a 3-day weekend, and he ought to be able to achieve it, but really he works all the way through it. But then halfway through the interview, I said, okay, well, we've identified what's essential for you. Now you have all the skills, you're the genius. Now show us how to put that into practice using all your Tiny Habits brilliance, which he did.
But wasn't it funny? Because, you know, the teacher teaching is one thing, but the teacher then reminding how to learn is another, you know, and we could play the same game with you, and we can if you like, but that was a very interesting 20 minutes for me.
Well, I thought so too. And now that you're saying it, I feel like, well, are you game? Are you game for being put on the spot?
Absolutely. I'll do anything you damn well like. I just want people to listen to this and to glean from it. We must talk about your book first, though, because that's why you're on, and I'd like you to sell some copies, and I'm sure you will. It's full of gold. When you focus on what you lack, you lose what you have. When you focus on what you have, you get what you lack. I love all this stuff. What are the minimum steps required for completion? Let's kick off with this one, Greg, if you don't mind. What does done look like? So when the promo for this book Effortless is finished, what does done look like for you with this book, say in relation to Essentialism, which, you know, has sold literally millions of copies all over the world?
For me, this book is an emotional book, both because of how I came to it myself personally, but also because it now comes out at a time when I think it has the power of relevance. And in a sense, it's a shame because this book is for people who otherwise capable and successful and driven, but they feel on the edge of exhaustion or the edge of burnout or even way past it. And I just sense that is true for so many people right now the world over after a year of getting through this pandemic. They've done it by grinding effort, but what's left at the end of it? And so Effortless comes as, I hope, a bit of an antidote to that pain. And so it looks like, for me, what done looks like is individuals discovering there really is an easier way to do things, that not everything has to be so hard. And in some instances, we make things much harder than they need to be.
Yeah.
And so that's the awakening, I hope, that can happen for people.
Good, excellent. And off the back of that, one section of the book is called The Heavy Cost of Light Tinkering. Now, this has been my life for the last 10 years. You know, I have over-tinkered because what I did, you know, in the 10, 20 years before that, previously started off as natural, and then there was momentum, and then, you know, all the foundations, all the hard work that I'd done, then you got to tend the crops, and then you get to a point where you begin to suffer your success. It's fine to suffer your failures, but to suffer your success and you don't know what to do. And so instead of taking a step back, and you talk about that too, you start to over tinker because you think you're so good at your particular craft that you can tinker where nobody has ever had to before. And the reason they've never had to do that before is because it doesn't need doing.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? That you get to the point of being maybe even in not just diminishing returns, but negative returns, where every extra tinker that you do, every little extra input is actually weakening your craft overall. That's what I hear you saying.
Yeah, no, 100%. And also what you do is tinker with other people who are trying to help you because you're the man, because you know better than everybody else. So they bring their box fresh new ideas full of youth and exuberance and potential and vision, and you go, yeah, but you might want to do it like this, and you take the wind out of their sails, and that's a lose-lose situation.
Yeah, that reminds me of a book that I was just recently reading that just says, look, we really do have to get past the command and control where we're getting into everyone else's business, and we need to be moving towards really trusting them. And it sounds like you had a bit of a curse of capability, having been successful, having seen a lot of stuff, having pioneered different ways to do things. You start to think, well, I need to be the one to put my thumbprint on every single other idea that comes my way. And it sounds like you got to the point where you thought, well, actually, I'm getting in people's business rather than just letting them shine and do great work and bring their new, fresh, innovative stuff forward.
Yeah, I know you talk about the obstacle is the way, as does your friend Ryan Holiday. And the obstacle is the way is fine if it's your obstacle and it's your way, but not if it's somebody else's.
Yeah, I mean, just this general theme of how we make things more complicated than we need to. And yours is a particular type, but it's born of success, that success can be a catalyst for failure.
I know.
If you're not careful. And that might sound like a first world problem, but it doesn't make it less of a problem.
I know. It's so interesting. Right. The power of the 1 minute pause. Come on. We all need this in our lives.
Well, I think that we do. The 1 minute pause takes many forms, but one of them is just the reset. In the middle of this endless Zoom, eat, sleep, repeat world that we're in, it's not impossible or even unlikely to get to the end of the day and you look at your Fitbit and it's 300 steps. And it's just this endless, you don't even know what day it is type year that it's been. And so the reset, I think, is whenever you start to feel out of control or you feel like other people's agenda is hijacking yours. It's just taking a moment. Okay, what really matters to me? What's important now? One thing I like to do is to try and create even a literal document with just successes, things you're grateful for across your whole life. And you just have it standing by so that in 1 minute, when you need to reset, you can read it and you get back into a more effortless state, which I think we all would like to spend a bit more time in.
Absolutely, 100%. Now, obviously, your book, Essentialism, is a Bible for many. It's on my top 30 book shelf. And by the way, I'm only ever allowed 30 books on my shelf, and yours has been on it since it was released. And if I want to introduce a new one, I have to eject one. And yours has never been on a shortlist, just so you know that.
Well, that's a high compliment coming from you. Thank you.
No, seriously, it's an awesome book. And again, reading Effortless in preparation for this, your new book, I thought, God, I can't wait for the weekend so I can read Essentialism again, which is perfect. And talking about effortlessness, you've got Tiny Habits, you've got BJ Fogg, you've got Atomic Habits, James Clear, and then you've got Backwards Thinking by Alan Watts. And if they're the three musketeers of this, would you describe your book Effortless as D'Artagnan nipping at their heels?
Well, I like the idea of that. I like the idea of being D'Artagnan in any form, in any way whatsoever. I think they do complement each other in the way that you're describing, and I hope that it just adds an additional perspective, because I think for a lot of people, they ask questions in the back of their head they don't even know they're asking, and they live out the answers. And one of the questions I just think that has disproportionate power is, how could we make this effortless? In fact, I just want to come back to you here. Are you game for this?
Yeah, totally, 100%.
All right, so a couple of questions for you. We'll just turn it around. So tell me, what is something right now for you in your life, business, personal, either? But first answer to the question, what is something essential that you're underinvesting in?
Oh, I know this is one of your favourite questions because I've heard you ask it 1,000 times before. And it's a rubbish answer because I'm pretty much sorted, to be honest. In fact, it might be I'm under analysing how sorted things are because I've done loads of work over the last few years and I'm pretty much there. I don't have a phone, you see, Greg. I don't own a phone. And all I've got left is time. Well, all I've made time for is to sleep well, to do my job 5 days a week, to go home as soon as I can, and make sure that everything's all right with my wife. Because if things aren't all right with my wife, for me, life almost isn't worth living. And then it's my kids. So they're my priorities. But in order to facilitate my priorities, sleep, fitness, hydration, nutrition, and I've sort of if you picked on me in some kind of webinar, I'd be rubbish, I think, to work with. Because right now, I'm quite smug at the moment, to be honest.
No, but actually, it didn't strike me as smugness, because what you really said, what I heard under that is I've been on a journey.
Right.
I mean, you're describing there was a journey before, and if I'm reading it right, probably some painful bumps somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
And then you've done the work, and you come out on the other side and you say, no, I mean, a lot of us only know what we really value in their violation. And it's like you're coming out on the other end of the tunnel going, okay, I actually do know what matters to me, what doesn't. And I've stripped away a lot of this other stuff so that I can consistently do the stuff that really matters to me. But that's what you just said to me. That's how I heard it.
Okay, so what do I do, Doctor? Any notes?
Well, I think the biggest question, I think, for me under those circumstances is you say, well, the people that matter most to me, you know, what's essential for them that's harder than it ought to be right now? You know, what are the burdens that they have? In some ways, I wrote Essentialism for me, but my wife says this way anyway, Anna. She says that I wrote Effortless for her. And, you know, she's only half joking when she says that, but I think that there's a lot of people in our lives, once we get, I think, to a point where we say, okay, I think I know what matters to me and I want to, my life is designed around it, that we start looking at the people around us and saying, okay, how can I remove burdens for them? How can I help them to feel more at peace, to feel more sorted in their life? And I think that's where I would go next in the journey.
And Krishnamurti said, didn't he, his big secret was, he said, I don't mind what happens, in as much as don't be surprised by things happening, because things will happen, you know, and being surprised by them is so predictable in a way for something that's supposed to be surprising, and also so it's wasted energy, you know. In a way, if you don't mind what happens, you might not like what happens, but don't mind things happening, then life becomes more effortless almost instantly.
I think that is true. This Effortless grew out of agony. But that, I think, is the power for people. Whatever they've been through, whatever challenge, whatever struggle, whatever mistake, whatever uncertainty you're facing, whatever big problem comes along, you have this moment right now. You know, what do you do in it? And if you choose in this moment to pursue the lighter way, and I mean the easier, but also the way that's more full of light, in this moment, you have something very special, and you can build on it and grow out of it. And the writing of Effortless grew out of the desire to really understand better what you can do in the difficulties, the inevitable difficulties of life. And these principles and practices grow out of that.
One of the things that is most effortless, that we find most effortful to do, is the to-don't list. And I know you're a big fan of this because of essentialism. You know, it's so much, it's not easier, but it takes so less energy to drop things that are bad for us than to cling on to things that we think are good for us but aren't in the end. Yet we're so reluctant to do it. You know, if you're in a really heavy situation, sometimes, first of all, you have prioritization forced upon you, which is a blessing in disguise. And then because your situation is so heavy, you are desperate to find the lightest path. And so that sort of physics, if you like, of the situation is much easier. But when things aren't so tough, we can still shed the weight and embrace the light. But we don't. Why don't we do that, Greg?
Well, I think the first reason is because we have been conned into thinking that we have to do it all, and that we have to do it the way that other people are doing it. So I think we fall into a pattern of behavior, not because we say, well, strategically, deliberately, intentionally, we want to live a life that's overburdened and exhausting, you know, and never ends. I don't think people wake up in the morning with that sort of intent. It's just that's the world that they observe around them, and have maybe either implicitly or I don't know, sometimes explicitly been told that's how you become successful. And so I think it's like people are just living that, and they suddenly wake up at some point, become aware, either because of a challenge they go through, or maybe because they read something or they hear something from someone else that they go, oh my goodness, there's a different way to do this. You can pursue, essentialism was about pursuing your prioritization in life in a very deliberate way. And what Effortless is simplification. And I think they both go hand in hand, by the way, because I think that, prioritization, okay, getting clear about what you want to do is necessary but insufficient. You can know the right things, but you can still be doing them in the wrong way. You can be doing them in a very burdensome approach where you say, well, everything needs to be done perfectly, or everything, needs to take the second. You got to go the second mile on every single thing, and to just discover, well, you don't. It doesn't have to be that way. Just because someone asks you to do X doesn't mean you have to add on, Y as well. I was talking to a manager of a university, and she is the type of person who was waking up, staying up rather till 4 a.m. in the morning, photoshopping for the next day, and for a volunteer, girls group at her church, and that's her life. She doesn't eat lunch because she thinks even that is being selfish. This is sort of the norm of her life. She hasn't deliberately chosen it. She's just fallen into it. And I said, well, what if you just ask a new question? The next time someone asks for something, instead of going over the top, you just say, well, is there an effortless way to do it? And the next time she's asked, it was about, well, will you get your videography team to come and record my whole semester? It's a university, the whole semester, and because I need to. And she almost jumped in. Yes, we'll add graphics, we'll add, we'll put intros and outros and music and wow you and just amaze you. And she almost did it. And then she just paused and she said, well, who is it for? And she got a bit more information. Yep. And it turned out it was for one student. And they came up with the solution, well, someone else can just put it on their iPhone and send it to him. And she gets off the phone, it's 10 minutes. She saved 4 months of our whole team to be able to just in that single question.
So important, isn't
right?
it? Yeah, and that's the most viable, least effort, isn't it? That's the thing there. If you do the least necessary, it's also the most necessary. So don't sweat the unnecessary.
Yeah, I think so. What you're trying to do is remove all these things you think it has to be this way and this way. And I remember actually growing up in Leeds, and I remember wanting to be a cross-country runner. And I wasn't that bad actually at the time, but I remember going to this race and I just got into the mode of what everyone else was doing. And they shot off at the beginning in a full sprint. And I was not ready to do that. I like to run slowly, sort of pace and come from behind a little bit. And I just killed myself in the first 100 yards. I think I came maybe 58th out of 61 people or something. It was absolute disaster, really. But one of the things I learned from that is like you can easily get pulled into just the way everyone else is doing something, the way they're living. And it takes a little self-awareness to go, I don't want to race that way. Yeah. I remember there was a YouGov poll done in London where, right at the beginning of the pandemic, where only 9% of people said they wanted to go back to life as it was before. Mm. And it's like, well, yeah, we don't want the pandemic forever, but I don't want to go back to the rat race. And right now, we're not back. Of course, we're not. We want to get back, but are we sure as we go through this transition we want to rush back to how it was before? Maybe there's something else.
I agree with you so much. Let's use that. It's given us the big, a global 1 minute pause, hasn't it? Let's not waste it. Very briefly, in 60 seconds, it's called Effortless. It's not an ism, it's an S. Essentialism is good. Stoicism is good. Thatcherism, good or bad, up to you. It's only thinking that makes it so, as Shakespeare says. What are you going to do with this? Because you can be an essentialist, but you can't be an effortlessist, can you?
No, I think they're complementary. They're like cousins.
Right.
So essentialism is a way of living and so on, and effortless is just this necessary piece that I think people missed in essentialism, where they just think, yes, the most essential things have to be the hardest thing in our lives. They go together, and they don't. They don't have to. You can design a life where the essential things are the easiest things in your life, and that can change everything. Actually, that does change everything.
I'm so glad you said that, because I thought it's a companion book, but I didn't want to say it because it was too pejorative, because it's not my book. But I'm glad you said it, because I think it is a cousin, and I think it accessorizes essentialism perfectly. So I'm so glad you said that.
Chris, it really is a delight to be with you, and I really do hope we can continue the conversation. I've enjoyed it thoroughly.
Mate, when we get on a plane, I'm coming to stay at your house for a few days. Give my love to Anna,
Done.
and to Grace, and to Eve, and to Jack, and to little Esther, and have a fantastic rest of your day. I know there's only an hour and a half left of it. Cheers, Greg.
Cheers. Bye now.
Wasn't he fantastic? That is Greg McKeown, author of Essentialism. If you haven't read that, you must. And his next book, which is out now, is called
Sometimes
Effortless.
I feel like throwing my hands up